The morning sun rose gently over the roofs of Olans, painting the sky in gold and orange. Birds sang from the trees, and the air smelled fresh after the night rain. Inside a grand white house at the edge of town, Cato stretched lazily on his wide bed. He was used to waking late, long after the sun had climbed high, but that morning was different. A sound reached his window, soft, repeated, and strange. It was not the sound of his car engines or laughter from friends. It was something else. He turned on his side, frowning. The noise came again. It was faint at first, then clearer, crying. Cato sat up slowly. "What in the world is that?" he muttered. He rubbed his eyes and rang the small bell by his bed. Moments later his house guard, Boma, entered, looking uneasy. "Sir, you should come outside," Boma said carefully. Cato frowned. "At this hour? What is it now? Another delivery gone wrong? I told them not to bring gifts so early." "It's not a delivery, sir," Boma said. "You must see for yourself." Curiosity got the better of him. Cato threw on his robe and stepped into the yard. The morning breeze touched his face as he followed Boma toward the gate. And then he stopped. Right there on the ground, just before his tall metal gate, lay 5 tiny babies. They were wrapped neatly in soft, colorful cloths, yellow, blue, green, red, and white. Each baby had a small bracelet on one wrist, marked with a single letter, A, B, C, D, and E. Their cries were weak but steady, like little voices calling out to be noticed. For a long moment Cato could not speak. He simply stared, his mouth slightly open. "Sir," Boma whispered, "what should we do?" Cato blinked and shook his head. Who would leave babies here? At my gate?" No one answered. The road outside was empty. The morning light stretched across the stones, and the only sound was the soft wailing of the newborns. Cato took a slow step forward. The rich, confident man that everyone in town called the Playboy of Olans suddenly felt small. He knelt down awkwardly, his robe brushing the ground, and reached out to touch one of the babies. The tiny fingers gripped his thumb tightly. He froze. The touch sent a strange feeling through his chest, something he had never felt before. He looked at the babies again, then at Boma. "How long have they been here?" "Not long, sir. We found them when we opened the gate. They must have been left before dawn." Cato straightened up and looked around again. The street remained silent, the air calm. Whoever had brought the babies had disappeared completely. "Bring them inside," he said finally. His voice was soft but firm. Boma hesitated. "Sir, all 5? "Yes, all 5, Cato said, his tone sharper this time. "We can't leave them out here." Servants hurried to carry the small bundles into the house. The babies were placed on clean blankets in the sitting room. The room, usually filled with perfume and laughter from Cato's parties, now carried a new sound, soft coos, cries, and hiccups. Cato stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. His friends would never believe this. Him, Cato, babysitting. He almost laughed at the thought, but the laughter didn't come. Something about the sight of the little ones made it impossible to joke. He walked closer, peering at each face. One baby had a small birthmark on her cheek. Another had tiny curls of dark hair. The others blinked at him with innocent eyes as if asking, "What will you do now?" Cato turned to his housekeeper, Mama Isha, who had been with him for years. "Do you think someone left them here by mistake?" he asked. Mama Isha shook her head slowly. "No mistake, sir. No one leaves 5 newborns at a gate by accident. Whoever did this meant for you to find them." Cato frowned. "Why me? I have no family. I have no children. Everyone knows I'm not the father type." "Maybe it's time that changes," Mama Isha said softly, her wise eyes watching him. He looked at her, surprised. "Time to change? I'm not keeping them, Mama Isha. I'll call the authorities, the town office, anyone." He stopped mid-sentence as one of the babies started crying louder. The others followed, their cries blending into a single sound that filled the room. Cato flinched. "Why are they all crying at once?" "They're hungry," Mama Isha said gently. "And cold. Newborns need warmth." Cato rubbed his forehead. "I don't know what to do." Mama Isha smiled faintly. "No one does at first, sir. But they'll teach you." For the next hour the servants bustled around. They brought warm cloths, milk, and small bottles. Mama Isha showed the younger maids how to hold the babies properly. Cato stood aside, watching in silence. His mind raced. Who could have done this? A secret lover? A trick? A test? He sat down slowly on the couch and sighed. The babies' cries had softened now, replaced by small, peaceful breaths. One of them was sleeping soundly, a tiny fist curled near its face. Without thinking, Cato leaned closer and whispered, "Who are you, little one? Why are you here?" The baby didn't answer, of course, but a strange calm settled over him. He felt, for the first time, the weight of something real, something that wasn't about pleasure or pride or image. He had lived many years chasing joy, but now joy had arrived in the form of 5 tiny strangers. When night came, he couldn't sleep. He walked through the hall and stopped at the sitting room again. The babies were still there, resting quietly under the dim light. Mama Isha was sitting nearby, humming a lullaby. Cato whispered, "Do you think someone will come back for them?" Mama Isha looked up. "Maybe. Or maybe they were brought to you for a reason." Cato sighed. "I'm not made for this, Mama. I don't even know how to hold them." She smiled. "Every hand learns when the heart is ready." He didn't reply. He just stood there, staring at the small bundles that had turned his quiet, empty house into something alive. Outside, the night breeze carried the sound of crickets. The stars shone over Olands, watching silently. Inside, Cato, the man who once believed he needed no one, sat beside the 5 tiny lives that had chosen his gate. And though he didn't understand why, he felt something stir in his chest. Not fear, not confusion, but something gentler. It was the beginning of responsibility, a word that had never truly touched him before that day. He reached out, gently touched one tiny hand again and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll figure this out." And for the first time in years, Cato didn't feel alone. By the next morning, everyone in Olands had heard the news. It spread faster than the wind. 5 newborn babies left at the gate of Cato, the man known more for his wild parties than for kindness. Women at the market whispered behind their baskets, men shook their heads in disbelief, and children followed the gossip with wide eyes. "Did you hear?" one woman said. 5 of them. At his gate. Another added, "Maybe it's a curse from one of the women he wronged." "No," a man argued. "It could be a test from the ancestors." Whatever they thought, the story grew with every telling. By noon, people came near Cato's house just to peek at the gate, as if they might see the mysterious babies themselves. Inside, Cato sat in his large sitting room, rubbing his forehead. He hadn't slept much. The sound of the babies crying through the night still echoed in his mind. He had tried to rest, but each tiny whimper had pulled at his heart. It was a strange feeling, one he wasn't used to. He called for Mama Isha, his housekeeper. "I'm going to the market," he said. "I need to talk to someone who knows about strange things." Mama Isha frowned. "You mean about the babies?" Cato nodded. "Yes. I need answers." The market was loud and busy as always, but when people saw Cato walking through in his fine clothes, whispers followed him like shadows. He ignored them, heading straight for a small hut near the end of the market road. Smoke rose from a clay pot outside. It was Mama Tali's home. Mama Tali was an old woman, the oldest midwife in town. She had brought almost every child in Olands into the world. Her back was bent, and her eyes were sharp with wisdom. When she saw Cato at her door, she smiled faintly. "Well, this is new," she said, leaning on her walking stick. "The Playboy comes to me." "What brings you here, Cato?" Cato bowed slightly. "Mama Tali, I need your help. Something strange has happened." He told her everything, how he found the babies, the bracelets, the silence of the morning, and the way no one came to claim them. Mama Tali listened quietly, her wrinkled hands resting on her knees. When he finished, she said, "Show me the bracelets." Cato took them from his pocket. Each was made of strong thread, woven carefully, with a small bead in the middle, marked A, B, C, D, and E. Mama Tali held them close to her eyes, turning each one over. Then she nodded slowly. "These are not random, Cato. These are spirit bracelets. They protect children who are chosen." Cato blinked. "Chosen? What do you mean chosen?" She smiled. "There are times when the spirit's place lives in the hands of someone who needs them most. It could be for protection or for a lesson. These babies are not a mistake, my son. The spirits chose you for a reason." Cato let out a shaky laugh. "Me? Mama, I can't even care for myself properly. I've never held a baby before this week." Mama Tali's smile deepened and her old eyes sparkled. "Then perhaps it's time you learn. The spirits do not make mistakes. They give what is needed, not what is easy." Cato looked down at the bracelets again. "But who would do this? Who would leave 5 babies at my gate?" "Someone guided by fate," she said simply. "Or maybe someone who knew that your heart, though hidden, still has light inside it." Her words made him uncomfortable. Cato was used to laughter, not deep talk about hearts and spirits. He nodded quickly, thanked her, and left, but her words stayed in his mind like a song he couldn't stop hearing. That evening he visited the local police office and even sent word to nearby villages, asking if anyone had lost a child, or 5. Days passed but no one came forward. Every night, when the moon rose, he would sit in his house and listen to the babies breathing in the next room. He had hired 2 nurses to help, but sometimes when the others slept, he would sneak quietly into the room just to look at them. One night, he sat there in the dim light, watching as one of the babies, marked with bracelet C, stirred in her sleep. Her little hand moved as if searching for something. Cato leaned closer and placed his finger near her palm. She gripped it tightly just like before. A warmth spread through him, something gentle and new. He couldn't explain it, but for the first time in years he didn't feel empty. Mama Isha found him there hours later, still sitting by the cradle. "You should rest, sir," she whispered. He looked at her with tired eyes. "They look peaceful when they sleep," he said softly. "Yes," Mama Isha replied. "They trust you." "Trust me?" he repeated, surprised. "Why would they trust me?" "Because you're the one they see when they open their eyes," she said. "Babies don't care who you were, only who you are now." Her words struck him deeply. He had always thought of himself as someone who didn't need others. Yet now, 5 small lives needed him, completely. In the following days, Cato tried to find the truth in every way he could. He talked to neighbors, to travelers, even to priests. Some told him to take the babies to an orphanage, but something inside him refused. He couldn't explain why, but every time he thought about letting them go, his chest felt tight. One afternoon he sat by the window watching the sunset paint the town orange and red. The babies were inside, giggling and cooing as Mama Isha played with them. Their laughter drifted to his ears, soft and sweet. He smiled without realizing it. The house, once filled with silence and loneliness, now carried life. Every sound, their cries, their hiccups, their laughter, made the air feel warmer. That night, as rain began to fall gently outside, Cato woke to their soft cries again. At first, he covered his ears with a pillow, trying to ignore it. But the sound didn't stop. It was like they were calling him, reminding him that he wasn't alone. Finally he got up and walked into their room. The nurses were asleep. The babies were restless, tiny faces scrunched up. He sighed, unsure what to do. Then he remembered what Mama Isha had shown him, how to hold them gently, how to whisper softly to calm them. He tried it, awkwardly at first, but then something wonderful happened. The crying slowed, then stopped. Their eyes blinked open for a moment, and one of them smiled, a small, pure smile that melted the last of his fear. He stood there in the quiet room, holding one of the babies close to his chest, listening to her heartbeat against his. Outside, the rain whispered on the roof. Inside, the house felt alive again. Cato realized then that maybe Mama Tali had been right. Maybe the spirits had chosen him, not to punish him but to change him. And as he placed the baby back into her blanket, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is where my life truly begins." That night, for the first time in many years, Cato slept peacefully. Days turned into weeks, and the 5 babies slowly became part of Cato's daily life. The man who once spent his nights at loud parties now woke up early to the sound of crying and tiny hiccups. His grand house, once filled with guests, music and bottles, now smelled of milk and baby powder. The change was quiet but powerful. Still, caring for 5 newborns was not easy. The nurses he hired soon grew tired and left. Cato felt lost. He didn't know how to feed them, how to change them, or even how to hold them properly. So one morning Mama Isha suggested, "You need someone with a gentle hand, someone who understands children." That afternoon a young woman came to the gate. Her name was Zuri. She was simple in dress, with calm eyes and a soft smile that made even the crying babies grow quiet. Cato looked at her uncertainly. "Are you sure you can handle 5?" he asked. Zuri smiled. "5 babies are many, but love is endless," she said. Her words stayed in his mind. He hired her that same day. From that moment the house changed again. Zuri moved through the rooms with quiet grace. She sang soft songs while feeding the babies, and her laughter filled the halls. Cato often watched her from a distance, amazed by her patience. She never shouted, never complained. She treated each child as if they were her own. At first, Cato kept his distance. He told himself that he was not good with babies, that Zuri could manage without him. But something inside him wanted to learn. He began asking questions. How do you make them stop crying? Why do they smile in their sleep? Zuri answered kindly, showing him step by step. You don't stop them from crying, you comfort them, she said once, holding baby A in her arms. They cry because that's how they speak. You listen with your heart, not your ears. Cato laughed at her words, but that night, when he heard the babies fussing, He tried to do what she said. He picked up one awkwardly at first, whispering softly. To his surprise, the baby quieted in his arms. He stood still, afraid to move, afraid the peace would break. Then slowly he smiled. As the days passed, Zuri noticed the change in him. Kato began helping more, feeding the babies, washing the bottles, rocking them to sleep. Sometimes she would walk into the room and find him sitting with all 5 around him, each with a small toy in hand. One evening, while Zuri was folding blankets, she glanced at him and said gently, "You're learning to love, Kato." He froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. Well, that was a word he hadn't thought about in years. He looked at her, then at the babies. Their tiny faces were calm, their breathing steady. He said nothing, but a soft warmth spread through him. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, Kato walked into the nursery. The moonlight fell across the small cribs, and the room was quiet except for the sound of soft breathing. He stood there for a long time looking at them. 5 little souls, sleeping peacefully. They looked so fragile, so innocent. He thought about how strange life could be, how one morning had changed everything. He leaned close and whispered, "You 5, you've changed my life." The words came out like a secret confession. For a moment, it felt as though the whole house was listening. The next morning, Kato woke early, not to noise but to laughter. Zuri had the babies in the courtyard, under the warm sun. They were lying on a soft mat, waving their small hands, making bubbling sounds of joy. Kato stood by the door watching them. Zuri looked up and smiled. "Come join us," she said. He hesitated. "I don't want to disturb you." "You won't," she replied. "They know you." He stepped forward slowly, and when he sat down beside them, one of the babies reached out and grabbed his shirt. Zuri laughed softly. "See? They trust you." He smiled, a real smile, not the fake one he used at parties but a quiet, true one. "Maybe they do," he said. The days rolled by, and with each sunrise Kato grew more attached. He began naming the babies one by one: Ao, Nia, Lani, Tommy, and Bayo. Zuri wrote their names above their cribs, and the room felt even warmer after that. Sometimes Kato would sit and tell them stories about the world, stories of rain, of stars, of laughter. "One day," he said once, "I'll take you all to see the sea." Zuri listened from the doorway, smiling softly. She had seen many men in her life, but none had changed like Kato. The proud, careless man had turned into someone gentle, patient, and full of light. One afternoon, as the babies slept, Zuri and Kato sat in the garden. The air was quiet except for the hum of crickets. "You seem different," Zuri said. Kato looked at the ground. "Maybe I am. Before the babies came, I thought I had everything: money, friends, freedom. But I was empty inside. Now, I feel alive." Zuri nodded slowly. "Sometimes, love finds us when we are not looking for it." He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time he saw not just the caretaker but a woman with strength and kindness. When night came, the house that once echoed with laughter and music now glowed with peace. The air was soft, the rooms were warm, and every corner felt alive with purpose. As Kato walked down the hallway, he passed the old room where he used to throw parties. The tables were gone. The music, the noise, the people, all gone. And yet he felt no sadness. He realized he didn't miss any of it. He stopped at the nursery door again. The 5 babies slept quietly, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm. Zuri was there, sitting beside them, humming a lullaby. Kato leaned against the doorframe, watching in silence. In that moment he felt something he had never felt before: peace. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because deep inside he already knew. The house that once echoed with emptiness now had laughter, life, and love. And for the first time in his life, Kato's heart was awake. It was a calm evening in Olans. The sun had set behind the hills and a cool wind moved through the trees. Inside the large house, laughter filled the rooms as the babies played with Zuri and Mama Isha. Kato sat by the window watching them. Their small hands reached for toys, their soft voices filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But outside the gate someone was watching. A woman stood in the shadows of the fading light. Her clothes were old, her face thin and weary, and her eyes carried the weight of many sleepless nights. She held a small bundle in her arms, not a baby this time, but a piece of folded cloth. After a long pause, she gathered her courage and stepped forward. The guard saw her first. "Who are you, woman?" one asked. Her voice trembled. "Please, I need to see Kato." The guard frowned. "Our master is busy." She lowered her head. "Tell him it is about the 5 babies." At those words the guards froze. One of them hurried inside. Moments later, Cato appeared at the gate, confusion in his eyes. "What did you say?" he asked. The woman looked up at him, her eyes red from crying. "They are safe," she asked. "They are?" Cato replied softly. "Who are you?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "I am the one who left them at your gate." Cato's heart skipped a beat. For a moment he couldn't speak. The wind blew between them, carrying the distant sound of children laughing inside the house. He finally said, "You? Why would you do such a thing?" Her voice broke as she began to explain. "I worked at a shelter in the hills," she said. "The babies were born there only days apart. Their parents. They were travelers who came seeking help during the great storm. But the storm destroyed the shelter. The water came fast and fierce. Many didn't survive." Cato's eyes softened. "The parents?" She shook her head. "Gone. All of them. I was the only one left, and the babies, they were so small, so helpless. I tried to keep them safe, but I had no food, no roof, no strength. For 3 days I carried them, hoping someone would help me." She took a breath, her voice trembling. "Then I remembered you." "Me?" Cato asked, puzzled. "Yes," she said, looking into his eyes. "Everyone in Olans knows you, the man with the big house and no family. I heard people say you have everything but nothing that matters. I thought maybe if you saw them, something in your heart would wake. I had nowhere else to go, so I placed them at your gate and prayed you would not turn them away." Cato stood in silence. The words struck deep. He thought of the morning he found the babies, how lost he had felt, and how slowly, day by day, his life had changed because of them. The woman wiped her eyes. "I watched from far away that day," she whispered. "I saw you come out, saw how you looked at them. I knew then that the spirits had guided me right." Cato's chest tightened. He took a slow step toward her. "You trusted me," he said softly. "Even when I didn't trust myself." She nodded weakly. "The ancestors do not choose wrongly." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The air around them felt heavy with meaning. Then Cato said quietly, "Come inside. You must be tired." At first she refused. "No, I cannot. I only came to see that they are safe. That is enough." But Cato insisted. "Please. You carried them through the storm. You deserve to see them smile." She followed him inside. The moment she entered the house, warmth and laughter greeted her. The babies were sitting on a soft mat, playing with wooden toys, while Zuri sang a gentle tune. When Zuri saw the woman, she stopped singing and looked to Cato. "This is the one," he said softly. "She brought them here." Zuri's eyes softened. "Then she saved their lives." The woman knelt on the floor beside the children, tears streaming down her face. "My sweet little ones," she whispered. "You have grown strong." One of the babies reached out and touched her finger as if recognizing her. She smiled through her tears. Cato watched the scene quietly, his heart full. The woman turned to him and said, "Thank you, Cato. You did what I could not." Cato shook his head slowly. "No. You gave me something I never knew I needed. Before that morning, I lived without meaning. I thought life was about pleasure, about wealth, about showing the world how great I was. But these children," his voice broke for a moment, "they taught me love. They gave me purpose." The woman nodded. "They were meant to. Sometimes the spirits place a light in our lives when the night feels longest." Zuri came closer, placing a hand on the woman's shoulder. "You are welcome here anytime," she said gently. "They are part of you too." But the woman only smiled faintly. "No, child. They are yours now. I must go where the wind takes me. But I am at peace knowing they are loved." Cato looked at her sadly. "At least tell me your name." She hesitated, then whispered, "My name is Asha." "Asha," Cato repeated softly. "It means hope." She smiled. "Yes, hope. That is all I wanted to leave behind." The room fell quiet. Asha stood and looked one last time at the 5 little ones who had changed so many lives. She touched each of their heads gently, blessing them. Then she turned to Cato. "Do not let their hearts forget kindness," she said. "I won't," he promised. As she walked toward the door, the sun began to rise again, filling the house with golden light. The babies laughed suddenly as if cheering her on. Zuri whispered, "She came like the wind and left like it too." Cato watched until Asha disappeared down the road. Then he turned back to the children, now playing together in the morning light. He knelt beside them, smiling through tears. "I was once a man who cared for nothing," he said quietly, "but you gave me everything." And in that moment, Cato understood, the world had given him a second chance, not through riches or fame, but through love that had come to him in the smallest, most fragile form. The house that once knew only emptiness now breathed with life and laughter. And though Asha was gone, her gift remained, a reminder that even the coldest heart can bloom when touched by love. Months passed, and the story of Cato spread all across Olands. The man who was once known for his wild parties and endless pride had become someone entirely different. The laughter of children now echoed through his big house, replacing the sound of music and noise that once filled his nights. He no longer cared about fancy clothes or gatherings. His heart now belonged to something far more precious, the small lives that had been left at his gate. Each morning he woke early to feed the children with zuri. Sometimes they cried, sometimes they laughed, but every sound reminded him that he was no longer alone. He had found a purpose that no amount of wealth had ever given him. The people of Olands watched in surprise. "Can this really be the same Cato?" they whispered. "The one who cared for nothing but himself?" It was true. Cato had changed in every way. He smiled more often, spoke with kindness, and spent his days helping others. He began visiting the poorer parts of town, bringing food and clothing for families in need. Wherever he went, children ran to him, calling him Uncle Cato. But Cato wanted to do more. One evening, while sitting on the veranda with Zuri, he said quietly, "I have been thinking. There are many children in this town who have no one to care for them. I want to give them a place just like these 5. Zuri looked at him with warm eyes. "That would be beautiful," she said softly. "You have enough land, enough heart. Let's make it happen." So they began to build. Beside Cato's mansion, workers laid the foundation for a new home, not for him but for children who needed love. When the building was finished, Cato stood before it with pride. It was painted in soft yellow and white, with wide windows that let sunlight pour in. He named it, the House of Morning Stars. When people asked why he chose that name, Cato said, "Because these children shine even after the darkest nights. They remind me that hope always returns with the morning." Soon the house was filled with laughter. Orphans and abandoned children found shelter there. Zuri taught them songs, stories, and lessons, while Cato made sure each child had food, clothes, and safety. The 5 babies, now crawling and giggling, were the heart of it all. They were the reason it began. Every evening, Cato sat outside watching the children play in the courtyard. Their laughter filled the air like music. Sometimes he closed his eyes and remembered the night he had found them, the cold air, the soft cries, the confusion. Now those cries had turned into joy. Zuri often teased him, saying, "You used to love parties, now your parties are full of milk bottles and toys." Cato laughed. "These are the best parties I've ever had." There were times when travelers came from other towns, just to see the man who had changed so much. They brought gifts, offered help, and asked him questions. "What made you change, Cato? What opened your heart?" He would always give the same answer, with a gentle smile. "Love came to my gate when I least deserved it, and I couldn't ignore it." One day the chief of Olands invited Cato to the village square. A large crowd had gathered. The chief stood before everyone and said, "Cato has taught us something we all forgot, that true wealth is not in gold or land but in love and kindness. He showed us that even a careless man can become a father to many." The crowd cheered, calling his name. Cato bowed his head humbly. He was no longer the proud man he used to be. He had learned the strength of a gentle heart. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Cato walked through the children's home. He checked each bed, making sure the blankets were tucked and the lamps dimmed. The 5 babies, now toddling around and learning to speak, slept together in one room. Zuri stood beside him, whispering, "They are growing fast." "Yes," he said softly. "One day they will ask me where they came from. And I'll tell them, they came to me as a gift from the heavens." He looked around the room, his eyes shining. "These children saved me, Zuri. I was lost before them. They taught me to love, to care, to be human again." Zuri smiled. "And now you're giving that love to others. That's what makes you special." He turned to her with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. She looked down shyly. "You learned to love because you wanted to. I only helped you see what was already inside." Outside, the wind carried the sound of children laughing in their dreams. The stars above shone brightly as if blessing the house below. Years later, the House of Morning Stars became famous far beyond Olands. Travelers from distant lands visited to see the man who had once been selfish but now lived for others. Some brought gifts, others brought orphans who needed care. And no matter how many children came, Cato always found space for one more. His hair grew gray and his hands became lined with age, but his heart stayed young. The laughter of children was the sound he loved most. He spent every morning walking through the courtyard, greeting them by name, telling them stories of hope and courage. Sometimes he sat by the gate, the same gate where his life had changed, and smiled at the memory. It all began there. 5 tiny babies, wrapped in blankets, had turned his empty life into something full of meaning. The people of Olans never forgot his story. Parents told their children, once there was a man who cared for nothing. But when love came to his gate, it changed him forever. And so, even long after Cato was gone, his home remained, filled with laughter, care, and the spirit of kindness he had created. Children grew up there, strong and loved, carrying his lessons wherever they went. And every morning, when the first rays of sunlight touched the walls of the home, people said softly, "Look, the stars of morning still shine."